Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. Thanks for inviting us to the Cloud Field Day. This is a great opportunity to share with you some of the things. I am Dave Stump. I am responsible for the global go-to-market at NetApp across all of our pathways, which we're focusing on cloud today. And how do we work with our clients on adopting or utilizing or leveraging our technology capabilities, tool sets in relationship to SAP workloads, okay? The most popular SAP workload right now is SAP HANA, as Keith has mentioned, and we'll talk a little bit about those type of things, and hopefully we'll address your question, Keith. If we do not, during my discussion, we definitely will with Scott. I've been in the SAP ecosystem as an architect, as a project manager, as an implementer, at a systems integrator, and pretty much in the vendor aspect relationships, whether it was IBM, Clark's Consulting, NetApp included. I'm going to turn it over to Scott to introduce himself really quickly. Scott, if you're not on mute.
Sure. My name's Scott McCullough. I'm an SAP Solutions Architect for NetApp. Dave has a little bit more years on me, so I started back in 1998 with SAP, with a global manufacturing company. So 11 years of basis there, and I'll start 11 years in September helping customers and partners light up SAP on NetApp.
So first question I'd like to ask you, did you know that, who helps SAP run SAP internally, not only their own systems, but their clouds and their development on those clouds? SAP Cloud Platform, Business by Design, it's NetApp, right? So we've had 20 years of a partnership with Co-Innovation. We've have over 125 and growing, depends on the year and how much they're leveraging our capabilities, our thin provisioning and our flex clone and rapid provisioning capabilities on where that petabyte goes up to 150, goes down to 110, whatever, but right around 125 petabytes. We're a founding member of the Co-Innovation Lab. And if you look at the bottom, I really just wanted to highlight for this conversation, we're in 12 SAP HANA Enterprise Cloud locations. They built their HANA Enterprise Cloud utilizing SAP technologies. And they also have their SAP Cloud, the platform as a service, running on NetApp. So we wanted to focus in on what are SAP clients and what is our point of view of what we see from our clients, as Scott and I and the rest of the team go out and talk to clients about what they're trying to get done with SAP. And almost every one of them is looking at this opportunity for digital transformation. If they're looking at S4 HANA or Suite on HANA, BW on HANA, or any type of workloads with HANA as an underpinning, they're looking at it as an opportunity to either retool internally or looking to leverage the cloud for that faster deployment, the cost reduction. As Niraj said earlier, Niraj and Jeff, the easy button, right? So I want to get to a platform as a service. Scott utilizes it, and he tells me every day how great. He's like, if I had this stuff, I'd probably still be doing operations. So don't make a face, Scott. You like the operations. So, but the challenges of doing this in the cloud, right? That's why we have Spot. That's why we're looking at managing infrastructure, right? Because you can get scope creep, right? Cloud crawl, you start getting these surprise bills on your workloads. I think Scott ran into this one time when he forgot to turn down his demo environment. He got a bill and he had to come to me and ask me, hey man, I won't let it happen again. But anyway, so the downtime, right? So there's sometimes downtime, right, with the high availability aspects that everybody's looking for, specifically around data, because compute is light, data is heavy, right? Data you have to manage and you have to be able to have it available. Hybrid integration, they're looking to that, but I see more and more where they're doing cloud only. Right. So as Scott will tell you when he's doing his demonstration, he spends probably 24 hours a day working with clients on how they're going to get onto the different cloud offerings that we have available. So how do we address that? So I'm going to try to get rid of this. Okay. So what if your SAP projects could get to the cloud, in that migration without headaches? So Jeff brought up several times, right? Using SnapMirror, block-based replication into CVO, right? Use that as a jump server to get into CVS because you can't get SnapMirror there just yet. You could use Cloud Sync and LAN. The idea is it's so easy to provision and manage these applications and the data stores when you're using CVS and CVO. CVS is even more platform as a service because you set it and forget it. Niraj was showing you how you just have two dials, right? You have a capacity dial and you have a throughput dial. And you adjust those dials to the specific needs of a workload or the workload within a workload. And what I mean by that is, am I running finance? Am I running sales and distribution? Am I running warehouse management, et cetera? So, and also what we show you with those, and Scott will show you a use case that we like to, in SAP, call system refresh. And those system refreshes are instrumental in how do I implement and deploy and test and deploy SAP applications. So when I first got into implementing SAP, one of the higher level executives at the project came up to me and said, "Dave, it's all about the testing, stupid." So it's all about the testing. It's still about the testing. And then the second piece is, how do I train? Because if I don't train my people properly, they're not going to use the system properly. And I'll end up with that's where I get junk data, incomplete transactions, et cetera. So if I could show you how to change and adapt from that waterfall approach of testing, integration testing, user accepted testing, et cetera, when I'm trying to go live, that Jeff was talking about earlier. If I could show you how to compress that and turn it into very more agile-like, DevOps-like, and do parallel testings around these environments and integrate at the end. And while doing all that and accelerating the project, I'm actually removing risk because I'm actually testing deeper into the data set and wider through the business scenarios. So, and that's where, and I focus in on how we use the snapshot, the provisioning, the flex cloning, the light provisioning, those capabilities that we bring not only to on-prem, but more importantly to cloud now, right? And giving those capabilities to people within the cloud, they've always had it with the VMs, and they've always had it with infrastructure as a service on the compute side. Remember, compute's light. We're now starting to bring that to our clientele with the light aspects of making data lighter than it has been before. Why aren't you moving? Okay, there we go. So what I wanted to talk about here is, right, don't really focus on the visual on the left, on the right. On the left, GCP, NetApp CVS, Cloud Volumes Services, which we just went through in detail. With Azure, with their CVS offering, they call it Azure NetApp Files. And with NetApp, we have all-flash fashion FAS, right? So if you wanted to attach that to the HCI with the GKE Anthos engine, whatever you wanted to do from that aspect, all three of these offerings that we have for our clientele run the gamut of where you want to put your data, and they all are certified to run SAP HANA. And there was a question earlier that I heard about whether this was just shared files. This is shared files, user SAP trans, interface directories, home directories, and data and log files. So the actual OLTP engine, where it stores its redo logs and where it dumps its data volumes out to, okay? And you can also use the shared files for your /backup if you wanted to do your stream, when you do your stream backups. But Scott will talk a little bit more about how we see a better use of snapshot technology for time saving. So we'll talk about that in a couple of seconds.
So a couple of questions on the use of the underlying storage and how you guys are enabling SAP HANA. If you've ever been in a high availability infrastructure for SAP traditionally, the database and database replication is probably the #1 way to protect your SAP environment, with some automation around restarting services and moving your individual instances so that you can remain highly available.
Yes.
What have customers, if anything, done using NetApp to mitigate some of the ways in which SAP has broken that methodology with an in-memory database for HA? Because I don't think I'm as concerned about DR in the cloud environment as much as I am high availability of services. So when my app servers go down, or when I lose a database instance, etc., how do I recover quickly and keep my services running?
Scott, would you like to take that question? I'm sure you're pent up this talk, right?
That's a great question, Keith. And it's a very common one. If you look at what is the common architecture to light up a SAP HANA environment for production within Azure, it's leveraging, as you said, database replication. Instead of shared stores like the old Veritas and Sun clusters used to do, HANA has unique storage for each node, node 1 and node 2. HSR works great. In fact, most customers want to leverage that. And then they put Pacemaker around that. We are actually work fine in that environment. What we can also do, so what HSR is really giving you is protecting you from a physical VM going down. It doesn't protect you from the more common, I put something into production, something's broke, all of a sudden we have data corruption. And I mean data corruption, not like the database won't start, I mean something's broke within the application. With HSR, that change is also on the other side. So we like to say, we cover the logical errors because we can take a picture of the HANA database. It's application consistent. We leverage the Azure NetApp Files snapshot ability. HSR is handling if you lost a physical server. So HSR is handling what you were saying, the HA. We're handling, you know what, the more common errors we see is somebody doing a human error. And those logical errors, the only way you protect yourself from that is doing backups. And we can do those very efficiently and very fast.
Yeah, and the other part, Keith, so if it's a scale up, that's exactly the way you would do it. If you do it a scale out approach, you'd use an NFS file system, and then you have the +1 server, and you have that as a failover server. So if one of the engines in the database, you might have, say, a 7+1, you have 7 worker nodes, and if one of those nodes go down, the standby node would then pick it up. And we utilize our NFS capabilities and our tie-ins. And on top of that, we can provide that. At the same time, the integration in the HANA Studio, so you can have those snapshots. And there's it's no coincidence that SAP, when they talk about snapshots, they have a HANA snapshot, which is an application consistent snapshot within the data set. We have snapshots at the storage level. The reason why they use that terminology is that they've become so accustomed to the capabilities that we provided to them over the last 20 years, utilizing those snapshots internally.
So one of the chats that's going on in the back channel is that for those of us that speak SAP, it's like from outsiders looking in, it's like the term Smurf. Hey, how do you Smurf that? How do you Smurf that? So can we, just for this discussion, can we differentiate when we're talking about SAP applications and SAP HANA, the database? I know it blurs sometimes, but it's confusing for anyone who isn't used to the everyday nomenclature.
Yes, Keith. So good point. Primarily, everything we've been talking about right now is HANA, the database engine. We have not been talking. So when Scott talks about HSR, HANA system replication, that's at the HANA database level. Okay. So we haven't been talking anything about HANA Studio is pretty much the studio that helps you manage your instances. Okay, so it is all, we've been talking about database engine and database application. We have not talked about like sales and distribution, or, you know, I did bring it up in the very beginning with BW. They're the different components that will reside in HANA from a functionality perspective. But everything that Scott and I have been talking about primarily has been about HANA Studio, HANA system replication, and HANA database engines running on NetApp storage. Did that explain it? Did that clear it up? For the audience?
Yeah, it clears it up, but sometimes just us in the SAP community, sometimes we'll generically refer to HANA as SAP. So just watch that nomenclature.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, we tend to use a lot of acronyms, just like every other technology, right? So we'll try to stay away from that. Okay, so the key to this slide, a lot of words and everything, just look at the acceleration piece, right? We use flexibility, scalability, simplicity, right? And Scott, Niraj showed you the simplicity, right? Point and click, a couple clicks and you're off to the races. You have NFS stood up. In typical cloud scenarios, if you're using virtual hard disk or ultra hard disk or whatever the label of it is, you have to install those, provision those, get them attached to a VM, install that VM, get a logical volume manager running, get NFS exports, right? Create that FS tab, do all that. And then on top of that, after you get it up and running, you have to monitor and you have to make sure that it continues to run, right? Especially if you're using it for user SAP trans and those type of things. User SAP trans is where my user binaries are and things of that nature. So what we do is we show you how to utilize this cloning capability, and Scott's going to show you a refresh, but we can use it for testing systems, and we can use it for training systems, et cetera. And what it is it's really utilizing this technology and capability so you can fail fast, fail often, succeed faster, right? The whole mantra of agile DevOps development. For sake of time, I think I'm going to roll through this slide, but we talked about minimize downtime, grow as you go, right? A secure network. So somebody asked about the security of CVS and CVS. Since they're residing in tenants that you have and domains that you have that you lease from your cloud provider, in that case was specifically Google, you're going to rely on their capabilities around network security and things of that nature. And then we reside within that domain. Okay. So we accelerate SA project, we protect without penalty. And what we mean by that is there is no additional fee for that. It's wrapped into the service, and we don't have any performance penalty when you turn on those snapshots. So some of the 4 main use cases, right, that we see with our cloud volume services, whatever the label is, it is available in several clouds, and is truly around HANA production. That's the data and log volumes. Shared files, very, very popular, especially because those shared files can get very, very large. and they're very key to what you're trying to do. With applications, you have intermediate documents, right? They call it iDocs. That's how you get your transactions from your clientele through EDI transactions. There's other things when you talk about interfaces, flat files, integration, other systems like Cognos for time cards and such like that. You might be trying to bring that into your human and capital management system. All right, dev test. We talked about that, and I think you'll see it a little bit more when you see the demo. And then disaster recovery, right? So disaster recovery is really good. That's where we see CVO, as Jeff was talking about, using SnapMirror, block-based, efficient replication. We see a lot of clients, existing NetApp customers, saying, why should I build myself out another DR data center now, right? I should just put it into the cloud, because the only time I really need to pay for the compute is when I'm testing my DR or using my DR. If I'm doing storage-based replication, I don't ever have to have another engine of compute at the target system.
So one question, is CVS support cloning?
Well, we support copies. We don't support a clone in that it is its own independent volume that you pay for. So today we have copies, but not clones.
Yeah,
but it's quickly
we
provisioned.
do clone it. We do clone it. We use cloning technology to make it available instantaneously. So if you have a 4 terabyte volume and you want to make a copy of it, you don't have to wait for that 4 terabytes to be copied before it's available. We create an image of it and then we copy it on the backside.
So are you guys going to walk through like that whole workflow? Because the technical capability, what you're explaining, I'm automatically fast forwarding in my head what that means for an organization from a speed and agility perspective. Like typically, whether it's HANA or legacy disk-based databases, to get up a training environment, to get up a development environment, to provision all of this took me 3 to 6 months for each landscape. Like, are you guys going to get to how this kind of solves that problem?
I'm going to turn it over to Scott so we can have the demo, Keith. And just so everybody knows, Keith, the check's in the mail. Thank you very much, because this is exactly what we wanted to talk about. So I'm going to give the reins over to Scott. Scott, just let me know when to advance the slides. And then when we're done doing the presentation, we're going to get into your demo. Okay?
Yes, and Keith, the demo basically is spot on what you just said. These slides, just a quick overview. The HANA database, if you're familiar with HANA database, for scale up or scale out, we're certified in Azure for scale up as well as scale out and +1. For GCP, as Niraj said, we're certified for scale up. There we go. So when customers ask me, first question is HANA certified? And the answer is yes. So as of November 2019, when Azure was certified, ANF certified for HANA, My calendar has been chock full from about January until I'm literally speaking 8:30 tonight with Australia folks looking to leverage ANF for their HANA deployments. It's really simple. After the certification question comes up, the second question is like, what does it look like? And I'll get into my demo to show you what it looks like. But the screen here in the bottom right, the data and log mounts, those are typically presented. If you're using Azure Disk, it's a bunch of persistence disk striped together, logical volume manager, you mount it. I ran Fiber Channel for over a decade. It works, it's great. Persistence disk works great. It's certified, it works. The issue is the complexity and administration ability on that compared to a simple NFS mount coming into your system. The simplicity is huge. And when customers see like, so it's just an NFS mount, correct. And it hits the performance requirements for HANA as well as the HA resiliency. Now, some of the file systems that Dave is saying, like user SAP trans, interface is a huge one. Interfaces doesn't need that type of performance. It definitely needs highly resilience. So how do you do that without using ANF? You light up a pacemaker HA-NFS cluster. When you do that, you basically get highly available NFS exports. But the issue is you have a minimum of 2 virtual machines. You usually have 1 or 3 SBD devices, SCSI initiators, to essentially do the tiebreaker. So you have about like 5 VMs to do HA-NFS. ANF,
what hypervisor are you using? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Within ANF. I'm sorry, not within Azure.
When he says ANF, he's saying Azure NetApp Files, which is our CVS product in Azure. So when he uses the ANF acronym, that's the Azure NetApp Files.
So it doesn't matter which type of instance I'm connecting to, whether I'm running in a virtualized instance or one of the 24 terabyte instances that Google provides. That's just insane. That's irrelevant.
Correct. It works the same.
Okay.
This is what we're talking about, taking pictures of the HANA database. It's nothing that NetApp or Microsoft created. It's actually SAP code within the database. I believe it came out in H1.0 SPS 5, and it's available with HANA 2.0 SPS 1 through 5. It allows you to take a consistent global synchronization point on an in-memory database to the persistence layer. The caveat is you have to ensure you have a disk subsystem that can take a quick and efficient snapshot that doesn't do a performance hit. So that's the caveat. So you can leverage this technology with ANF. We have a fast snapshot with HANA snapshot, which shouldn't be confused with a storage snapshot. Both of those together give you application-aware snapshots from the HANA database. Meaning, Keith, to your point, when you want to refresh a training system or a QA system, those pictures of your data for production can absolutely be used for a recovery point. But more often than not, you don't restore a database in production. You replicate the issue in a QA sandbox system, fix it there, and then transport those changes into production because production is always moving. Those pictures of the database allow you to do that quickly and efficiently. Can I do that with native file backup or third-party backend? Yes. The difference, for my instance, when I ran SAP, that would have been about a day and a half to refresh an environment. And when I talk to customers...
the other practical instance is that SAP DBAs, basis DBAs, don't trust storage snapshot technology.
Oh, yeah.
The fact that it's integrated into SAP and you're pressing the SAP button versus pressing a NetApp button or insert storage provider here. I've just never gotten any DBA, let alone a SAP DBA to trust anything outside of the SAP ecosystem.
That's correct. And I'll be the first. I work for NetApp, but I'm not really a storage guy. I'm more about how to leverage the infrastructure to help the SAP system help the business. And to your point, that's exactly, if I go to a shop and say, look, we're going to take a snapshot of your system. The DBAs as well as the basis people. I mean, I was a basis person for 11 years. I would say, well, it doesn't mean anything to me. Maybe user SAP trans and interfaces. Yeah, it's unstructured data. It works fine. But for a database, Oracle DB2, SQL, ASE, HANA, I need some type of quiescing. And that's what SAP has built into the HANA database. You just have to have a storage subsystem that can take advantage of it. And those 3 commands are exactly what they are. We have tools. Microsoft has a tool called AZAC Snap that orchestrates this. NetApp also has a tool called Snap Center. Again, it orchestrates this. They're both different tools, both have pros and cons. At the end of the day, they orchestrate the same exact workflow. So hit the next slide, Dave.
And before we get to that next slide, time check. You only have like 2 minutes on that. You have 2 minutes on that next slide, Scott.
Yeah.
And
okay.
everybody in the audience, when Scott, and he's been doing a lot of Azure NetApp file work, as you can tell, he uses the A&F acronym all the time. But when he says A&F, the same capabilities and functionality that you're used to and what you hear from him conceptually works the same manner in the same regards in CVS GCP. So
that's correct.
Cloud Volume Services equals A&F from an acronym perspective, okay?
And I apologize for that. I just been heads down with, we just got certified for GCP, and hopefully that'll be ramping up just like A&F is. And Keith, to your last comment, you said you wouldn't trust it if it wasn't integrated into the tool. This is a screenshot of what SAP HANA or SAP Basis Administrators would be used to. The difference is in the right-hand column, it says snapshot. More likely they're familiar with file or backends. This is a snapshot, but it shows it's 100% integrated into the application. All right, Dave, can you stop sharing? I'll share my screen.
Absolutely. It's all yours.
All right. Where is my Microsoft Remote Desktop? All right, so as Dave said, I do have a demo system in Azure. What I'm showing you here today, you can do the same thing within CVS. I just happen to have my demo lab lit up in Azure. I will also say my demo lab is very, very small. They're not leveraging M-series VMs because I'm being kind to my boss's credit card. Let's just say that. So they're very tiny, but they're functional, so they work. The one thing I was showing, let me in here. So what I was showing before on the PowerPoint, this is what it looks like on the actual system. This is my demo system, but if you go to any SAP HANA shop, it's going to look similar, albeit the SID, the 3 letters, QB1. So my environment, QB1 is my production system. You can see on the right-hand side, those mounts would look familiar if you're familiar with HANA. On the left-hand side, it probably looks a little bit different. This is leveraging Azure NetApp Files. Again, CVS would look very similar. It's an NFS share. If you run SAP, then you've been using NFS shares or CIF shares if you're in Windows for global file systems. We can leverage that same mount points, that same mount type for the actual database. And like I said, I've been running SAP long enough to know it's complex. If you can make a system less complex, you reduce risk and you just make it a little bit easier to run. And that's exactly what A&F does. But that's not the cool stuff. It does make things simple. It does make things easier. But the data management part, what Dave was speaking about in his PowerPoint, is what we really go after. And what I have here, let me set up this situation. I'm going to use an actual use case that my previous shop had. And what I found doing this for almost 11 years with other customers around the world, it's very similar. So every SAP shop thinks they're special. At the end of the day, we share a lot of the same issues with users, as well as making this application run for your business. So in my environment right now, I have 2 systems. I have a QB1 system. We'll say that's my production system. And we'll say SB1. SB1 would be my QA system or sandbox. I don't have transactional data and I don't have application servers. Again, I'm being cautious of my boss's credit card, but I am creating users, which is similar to just a sales order, a delivery note. It's a record within the database. So Keith, to your point, if I took a snapshot of the storage system without quiescing, a user wouldn't come back. You got to have a quiesced state. So that's why I basically just use simple users. My use case when I was working as a basis administrator, we were changing the sales order screens. And if you're a geek about basis, is the VA01, VA02 sales screens. It contained about 30 plus transports. And if you're not familiar with SAP, a transport is a change within the application. In this case, it was a much larger load than normal. 30 plus transports was a pretty big change. The basis team supports the business. We also support the business process teams. So sales and distribution worked with customer service to change these screens. In my demo, I basically say, look, here's my user Mark. Mark is representing those 30 transports that we're going to change our sales order screens. What happened when we moved these transports into production, we did it on a Wednesday evening. I remember this really well because it wasn't a good evening. We moved them into the evening. About 3 a.m., Germany started calling because they couldn't enter orders. Didn't think anything much of it. When I got into work in the US on East Coast, about 7 a.m., the help desk was already at my cube, as well as customer service manager. We were taking sales orders by pen and paper because the sales order screens were not working. Here's the issue. Here's what's similar to every SAP shop. Within SAP, what happened was, in my example, let's do this. I'm going to create a user called Luke. And here's my user Luke now, refresh. So this user represented the sales order screens. Obviously, it's different. Mark is different from Luke. We were having issues in production because the transports that went in, long story short, they went in a different order. The order is very critical when we put changes in. We didn't know, but the order was incorrect when we put these in. The other issue is we couldn't reproduce this within our QA system. The QA system was working fine. The issue was in real production. We had plants already doing deliveries. We had HR, we had finance. 3/4 of the SAP systems working. Sales and sales was not. We were basically taking orders by pen and paper. So what do? As a basis administrator, you think about, you can't restore the database. Could I with a snapshot? Absolutely. But you can't do that because it's so much integration happening. Dave likes to say, what's the good thing about SAP? It's integrated. What's the bad thing? It's integrated. So you can't simply restore that one file or a database. You got to refresh your system. In my environment, let me do this. So my test environment, my SB1 is my test system. If I had, Dave says I was excited about using Azure with SAP, and I am. The ability to spin up another VM and basically get this sandbox up and running is unique into the cloud, where I was on basically in my data center. I didn't have that ability to easily spin up machines. So in my demo environment, I'm going to shut down the HANA database and then reuse this system for like a system refresh. As the database is coming down, what I also need to do is I got to take a picture of my production database as it sits right now, because last night's backup, if it was before the transports, doesn't really help me. I need to have a system right now. What does it look like? Remember that PowerPoint that I was showing you before, the SQL statements. The SQL statements are as simple as what you see on the screen. Now, I said before, we have tools to automate the orchestration of this, and we do. Microsoft has a tool, it's command line, it's .NET, it's a JSON-driven file, very customizable. NetApp has a tool called Snap Center. It's a Windows-based GUI that does the same workflow. There's pros and cons with everything in this world. The tools do the same thing at the end of the day. Really depends on what you want. In my case, I'll show you what our Snap Center tool does. So if I scroll over to Snap Center, here's my resources. Now I've already have a resource created, QB1. This is what we'll say my production system. I want to back up the system right now. So I say back up now. There's a schedule for it. I say go. What's happening from a HANA perspective, let me see if I can catch it. HANA data, SID, mount 1. Check this out. You know how Dave said SAP liked our snapshot so much they named their snapshot after ours, the store snapshot? They actually do. You go into any SAP HANA environment and you do this SQL statement, it will create an HDB001 file system for the system database, a snapshot _ data backup. That is the physical file that gets created as a checksum, the binary file that HANA creates. That, in addition to a snapshot of the data volume, remember the data volume on ANF, gives me that application consistency. Just doing one or the other doesn't work. So the orchestration tools are making sure that workflow is taking effect. You can do that by hand. I have customers that actually create their own tools to do that workflow. It's just important to understand it's very simplistic once you see how it works. So let's jump back over to Snap Center here. Let me click on this. So the application quiesce part, that's when it actually creates the HANA snapshot. It created the ANF snapshot already, and it's finalized the workflow. If I go back to that screen, and I do another long listing of that directory, it's gone. And that's the workflow. Creating the HANA snapshot, doing the Azure NetApp Files snapshot, or in your case, if you're in CVO for Google, doing the GCP CVS snapshot, and then basically taking the database out of that quiesce mode. Now here's the other cool thing. Keith, you'll like this. So if you go over to the HANA database, the HANA catalog, here's my system database catalog for QB1. If I hit refresh, you can see there's another snapshot there. Now the other thing to understand, we have customers with, well, one customer has a 48 terabyte scale-out database, but the snapshot from the SQL command line as well as the ANF, they're about the same time. It doesn't matter if I have a half a terabyte database or a 6 terabyte database, the process is the same. That's why when customers hear about this ability, they're not familiar with it because their subsystem that they were using before didn't support fast snapshots. When they hear that Azure and Google now have the ability to do these fast snapshots, the first question is, well, how do you leverage it? It's exactly what we're going over here. Here's the other thing. If you see over on the right-hand side, it's kind of off my screen, but if I hover over the EB ID, that's the external backup ID within the HANA catalog. It has a unique date and timestamp and a unique number. It's a little bit easier here to see it on the comment screen. This is how we tie in the two. The external backup ID has a unique date and timestamp. We'll say 0352. If we go over to the Azure NetApp Files portal, here's my dashboard. Here's my account, US East. And here's my volumes. Now remember, the volume that I was using, QB1 HANA data, that is the volume that is running my source QB1 production system. If I go to snapshots, and when snapshots come up, it will show you all the double click. There we go. Come on. It'll show you, if my screen refreshes, all the snapshots within that volume. I promise it does. Let me go back in. There we go, it's loading. So that snapshot, 3052. We go back over to the HANA catalog, 3052. That's how we connect the snapshot in the HANA catalog to the Azure NetApp File snapshot. Now remember, that's an application consistent picture of the database. Here's the next thing we want to do. QB or SB1 should be down right now. If we look at the file system on SB1, it looks very similar, albeit a different SID. On the left-hand side of the screen, you see that is my volume right now that I'm using for, remember the user mark, the correct sales orders we're always working in the our sandbox here. HANA is down right now. The one thing I want to do is a system refresh. So the first thing I'm going to do is unmount this data volume. And why am I doing that? I'm doing that because I want to create a clone from the picture that I just took from my source system. In SAP language, it's called a system refresh. If you're not leveraging Azure NetApp Files or GCP CVS, you're doing a file backup and file restore. It's a long process. This is much easier in that from that snapshot that we have, I can do a few things. One of them is if I hit revert volume. That's actually reverting my volume in place. I don't want to do that because production is running. What I want to do is restore to a new volume. And what do I want to call this? I'll say QB1-HANA-data-clone-2. Give it a size, say 900. Hit next and create. Now, as Dave was saying before, what we're happening right now is Azure NetApp Files is giving the ARM, the Azure Resource Manager, the directions of, hey, create a new volume based off this snapshot. From a NetApp technology, we're creating a flex clone and then we're splitting it into the background. So we are taking the full storage footprint. If I was a 4 terabyte volume, I will have a 4 terabyte volume when this process completes. The caveat is I can mount the volume before that process is finished. Unfortunately, there's no static or status bar or no time clock. What I usually do is I go into my operating system. Now remember, I updated that volume with .2. So before I mount it, from a system admin point of view, I'm going to etc via my FS tab, look for clone, say 2, get rid of that space. And the reason I do that is because look at all the mount options. This is the same thing as if I was using persistence disk. You got to make sure you use the system parameters that are tuned for your subsystem. In our case, we're using NFS v4.1. We have it tuned specifically for that. So it's important that we use all the correct mount options. So if I just update my volume name, I should be able to say mount HANA data SB1 mount. And this is the part where it's not yet done. So if we go back into the portal, you can see this is basically running. Oh, it's complete. Let me try it again. Come on. Come on. There we go.
I think you called it -2.
Did I? Good catch.
I'm not sure, so don't blame me.
Let me jump. I can easily go back in the portal and just verify that. Let me go to dashboard, US East. Come on. There we go. Let me go into volumes. Get this open. Wow, this is really slow. HANA data clone 2. Let's go to volumes. What did I call that guy? Dash. Good catch. Who was that? I owe you a beer.
More a Scotch person, but thanks.
I owe you Scotch. Let me mount that back up. All right. So that was one operation I had to do at the operating system side. Basis people usually say, is there anything else I need to do? And if you look what I did, if you understand the workflow we just did, we took a picture of production, we cloned it to QA, I mounted it. One other thing, so check this out. HANA data, SB1. What do you think it is? It's this, and it makes sense, right? This is my source system, QB1 ADM. So what I have to do is the only other operation I have to do is change ownership. I can spell. Oh man, my R, SB1 ADM star. That allows me to have ownership of the files. One other thing I want to show you. Remember that file that got created when HANA was in a quiesce mode on my source system? Well, it's there. And that makes sense, right? Because I took a picture of the database in the quiesce standpoint from an ANF point of view. I cloned it to my target system. It is basically at that point in time. You can now, for time's sake, there is a executable that you can do on this. HDB backup check as city ADM. You can get more information about that file. Date and timestamp of when the snapshot took place. Name services, versions. There's a lot of information within that executable file that SAP puts in there. That's how an in-memory database can get a consistent backup by leveraging HANA ability to do this global synchronization point with a storage-based ANF snapshot.
So a lot of people may not realize the significance of this, because if you work in container world or worlds where the data resides in a VM, this is kind of like, oh, okay, this is VM snapshotting. But that capability, bringing that capability to SAP, specifically an in-memory database, where it's unlikely to run inside of a VM, is a big deal. And these transports and the ability to create workflows, to create different environments, et cetera, is where the value is at. That's just for context for folks who either are watching this video or for my fellow delegates. We just didn't have these tools. And we don't have the VMware type tools in HANA because despite what VMware says, it doesn't make much sense to run production inside of a VM.
Right.
Absolutely.
So, and to build on that, Keith, so the scenario I like to use and the tagline or whatever you want, the mantra, it's time machine for SAP, right? So if you understand time machine for your MacBook, we're giving you time machine where you can go back and revert to any time as long as you have a snapshot to do it. And it's
Correct.
even better than that because I can clone off of that time share, that time stamp. right? So now I can go back where Scott said, he's shown you how he's going back before they put the transports in that made Luke Mark, or Mark Luke, whatever it may be.
Mark was a good one. Not to say they're not. They're both good.
But you can also go back a week. You can go back 2 weeks. So if you're doing a lot of agile testing and DevOps, and there's times when you test something and you say, was that the last iteration of that test? Well, you don't know because you don't have the system anymore. Here you do. You can go back and make a clone of that system from a week or 2 weeks ago and look at what that testing system looked like in test cycle 1 or test cycle 5, whatever test cycle it was. So those type of things you really can bring to an SAP and really accelerate the implementation because you don't have to spend so much time hunting things down. Sorry, Scott.
No, it's actually, that was perfect because I lost connection to my RDP session. So let me try to log back in. But as Dave said, that picture of the database, and Keith, to your point, that's why I get excited about this stuff. Within the last 5 minutes, it's the ability to take application consistent pictures of the database that basis people will have control over to do these system refreshes, to do just like my environment. We had to hurry up, adapt to what we had an issue. We quickly got a system up to the SD, the sales and distribution people. They, you know what, before we actually gave it over to them, we did the same exact thing as we did on our production system in this demo. We took a picture of it because what I wanted them to do, if it was truly a transport ordering issue, which it turned out it was, I wanted them to at least produce it 2 or 3 times before we did that again in production. So we took a picture of the QA system. We turned it over to the SD people. I still, Jess McGinty, wherever you are, I think he's retired now, bless his soul. He was the one who understood the transport sequence and fixed it. We reverted back to a baseline. I said, all right, this is a picture of the production database that we just took. Do the transports again into QA to see if we get the same results. We did. That point, we knew for sure because we're using a fresh copy of production. We put those transports into production. Thank God we had customer service back and running again. But understand SAP, I mean, we were shipping, we were doing HR, we were doing finance. The system was still working. We just had something broke that we had to quickly adapt to it. And I get a lot of times like, it's just storage or it's just ANF, it's just a PaaS, platform as a service. And you're right. But when you leverage these type of data management abilities, you can, from I call it the lowest common denominator, the storage, you can actually help the business do what they need to do. In my case and many other basis cases, it's reacting to an issue. The other issue that Dave says, projects need training and testing. Revert back to baseline, do the data load again. It's not that good. You know what? It's not a big deal. It's a snapshot and we can revert back to baseline again. Do the data load again because I don't want my production system having garbage data in there because that just means trouble for me. And my job as a basis administrator is to make sure that system's 24/7, 365 and performing. And if you give me data management abilities, that's really what it comes down to. The other question earlier on I get, is ANF certified for HANA? It is. Is CVS certified for HANA? It is. Why would I use one over the other? Why wouldn't I just use the Azure native offerings? And honestly, they work. You can't do these type of data management features that if you speak with a basis person and you show them, doesn't matter what size the database is, they go, that is something I hopefully will never have to use, but I know I will have to use it sometime in my future.
So Scott, I don't want to interrupt you. I do have a time check, right?
No, that's good. I'm good. Go ahead.
We got 3:24. I don't know if you want to try to get back in your RDP session or not.
No, it's just the restore. I mean, the important thing was showing how you could take an application consistent picture. The other part was basically just doing a restore. But this is more important with our last couple minutes.
Okay, so I just wanted to wrap up here and I'll turn it back over to Niraj and Jeff if there's any closing comments that they want. But I wanted to highlight, with COVID-19 and with all the brouhaha and with all the shows getting canceled and turning into virtual events, the first one that we were actively participated in from NetApp's perspective was SAP Sapphire, which was scheduled for early June in Orlando. And what we did was we put together a virtual booth. In this virtual booth, you can see the address up on the screen. I suggest take a picture or copy down that address. go check it out. It is a really cool, really nice experience. You feel like you're walking into a booth. There's different rooms to go into. There's a trivia contest. I think it's still active. I'm not sure. You can't win it anymore. We already gave away the gift card. But we left it. We leased this booth for a year. So we are going to continue to update the information. So when things come out from the CVS group, right, from Jeff and Niraj, and we start seeing demos when Scott gets a lab set up with GCP and does the same thing with their console and their workspace manager. When we do all of that, we will get recordings of it. We will have TRs, tech reports, we'll have documentation, and we are going to deposit it into this booth, right? So, we're even going to look at joint branding within the booth, right? Having pods within the booth where you could go in and look at the different avenues of how you can consume our technology.